Around the world, literally billions of people believe in some form of a god, an all-knowing, all-powerful creator of everything in existence, absolutely confounding atheists.
Would you look at that? The man who dresses like a monk, a classically insular class, who spend more time pondering the nature of book though than, interacting with people, says something wrong about a group of people he probably doesn't interact with. Now, is that to say that no atheists find that confusing? Of course not. Almost anything can be true of any type of person ever. However, plenty of atheists, myself included, understand full well many reasons people may believe in various deities, and asserting otherwise demonstrates you haven't bothered to actually ask what any of us think. Very smart of you, Mr. Atheists are doing atheism wrong, man. Oh right, that explains a lot.
You believe in something that you can't see, hear, or touch, of which there is no physical evidence of in the entire universe? Yeah, only for Catholics, this does not mean that God is the result of some wishful thinking or illogical fallacies.
No, it's because you have been convinced or convinced yourself of something despite the lack of evidence. That's just how faith works. But just because you are convinced doesn't change the fact that you believe something without evidence, considered in almost every other field of anything as kind of a really bad thing to do. But for some reason, God gets a free pass, probably because of his big dick.
We believe that there is not only evidence for God's existence found in the accounts of sacred scripture, personal prayer, and private revelations.
So, bad evidence. Eyewitness accounts of various first, second, third degrees. Also brainwashing yourselves. Please, 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 God be real. And private revelation, aka attributing to something that could easily be explained by natural causes. Magic Man must have done it. I'm not going to call it not evidence, but like I said, it's just really, really bad evidence.
But actual proofs, philosophical arguments that logically point to the existence of a god.
Well, that's not exactly what I would call compelling. While logic is great and it can help you figure out what certain evidence could mean, logic all on its own is not and never will be proof for anything in reality. Because using pure logic, you can quote-unquote prove literally anything, both one premise and also its complete opposite, meaning that every single thing that you have used logic alone to come to, because of the lack of concrete physical evidence, can also be proven false just as easily, although the lack thereof of said heavy boys for God man makes one set way more likely than the other.
What are these proofs, and what does it mean for our faith? This is Catholicism in Focus.
What the fuck? What is this, the late 90s, early 2000s? Seriously, we got robesmen sitting there, all pious looking, and then boom, this shit. I half expected to see Tony Hawk doing a 360 Birdman across the screen. Christ. Because that's another skateboarding thing I know, because I'm so cool.
In the absence of verifiable scientific evidence for God, theologians and philosophers have turned to logical arguments to prove God's existence for centuries.
And funnily enough, relying on just those things has done literally nothing towards proving shit about God. Almost like you cannot prove God by doing that, and you should probably stop calling it fucking proof, at least in the way we all understand it, and instead call it, I don't know, how about bullshit arguments I really like so I will believe. Yeah, I'd be totally cool with that. If you all started saying, here's my bullshit arguments I really like for believing in God, I promise I'll stop making fun of you, okay? I think it's fair.
Sometimes you don't have to see something to know it exists.
Yeah, but most of those things we can't see that we know exist are like gases and electrons and shit that, can be fucking detected.
While the arguments are many and varied, and not all of them are particularly helpful,
change not all to none, and that's actually true. Well done.
Each of these arguments can be grouped into one of four categories of approaches: cosmological, ontological, moral, and theological.
So it's God exists because things, God exists because I say so, God exists because feelings, and God exists because something, 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 watchmaker. Okay, cool. I mean, they are all not what I would call a great basis for arguments, but go ahead. I'm sure you'll do great, champ.
The first type, the cosmological argument, is probably the most famous and the strongest of the arguments.
So it's all downhill from here then? Okay, if you say so.
Looking into the universe, or cosmos, we notice a relationship between all in the created order.
Formed, not created. Just got to throw this in there. You can't call something created if you don't know it was created. Otherwise, you are just begging the question. All we know is that it formed. Saying created assumes a creator. Bad theist, no bedtime snack for you.
There are patterns that develop, motion is visible, and contingencies that arise. What this argument proposes is that if there is anything that is now that wasn't before, there must be something that caused it. For an example, we can look to St. Thomas Aquinas' second proof, referred to as the proof of first cause or efficient cause.
Wow, TomTom Portable Twatnav keeps coming up a lot recently, and the more I hear, the less impressed I am. I mean, for his time, I'm sure he was brilliant, but when you base so much of your argumentation on him, instead of new ideas extrapolated from them, well, it leaves one thoroughly unimpressed with your development.
We know that if something, A, exists, it did not create itself, but was created by something else, B. If B doesn't exist, then A cannot exist either. But this also applies to B, meaning that there must be a cause C for B and a cause D for C, and so on. To repeat this process infinitely would not make any sense, for there must be a first cause. And the only way for this to be true is if there is a being that is causality itself.
You did it again! Being, which is 5/7 of begging. You know, the question. It would be something. There are things that produce things without being, beings, but objects. So you cannot assume that if there is a first cause that it must be a being. And now I've said being so much it's lost all meaning. Damn it.
Existing outside of time and space in pure actuality. In other words, God.
Or, that doesn't happen because that's just a conclusion reached again without any solid evidence. The fact of the matter is, outside of the universe, or before the universe, or whatever, is something we know vanishingly little about. So to claim you have figured out what it is, and what is actually there, and that it is in fact a being who does things on purpose, is basically just a god of the gaps. There are any number of other logically consistent things that it could be. But I'm not going to assume I know it's fucking Gandalf because I really like The Lord of the Rings.
You might think of it in more practical terms. Why do you exist?
Every day I believe more and more that it's to suffer at the hands of morons.
Well, because your parents made you. Why do they exist? Because their parents made them. And so on, and so on.
I am pretty sure that I, as in the Cirsic cartoon man, exist because some dumb asshole wanted to argue with people online, but didn't want to have to bother dressing up just to make bad jokes, come up with arguments, and say swear words at idiots, and now it's mostly a bad habit, or as some might call it, a job. Ugh.
But when would this stop? Before every being, there is something that caused it to come into being, including the Big Bang itself. Everything in existence may have existed in a super dense mass before exploding into everything that is.
Why? I know you are probably not one of those idiots, but why? Why do you always have to get this one wrong? All the time. Big Bang, not an explosion. It's an expansion, and that's simply not the same thing. Please stop it.
But what caused that mass to explode? How did that matter come to exist in the first place? Why is there something rather than nothing?
Because if there wasn't something, you wouldn't be here talking shit about how...
There must be a first cause, and the only explanation for this would be a being that has always existed and was never caused by anything else.
Even if we go with your logic, it would still only get you as far as a thing. Beings is just not on the cards, my dude, unless you can show some uncaused being who makes things. And guess what? I know you can't. You know how I know? Well, I'll let you in on my little secret. I may be an idiot, but I'm not a fucking moron.
We call that being God. St. Thomas uses this line of thinking for three of his other arguments, namely for motion, contingency, and gradation, all pointing to the illogical nature of an infinite regress, to prove that there must be an ultimate mover, cause, necessity, or standard by which everything else exists.
Only illogical within the universe as we understand it, and he, just like you, doesn't know what the rules beyond this universe are, if there are any at all.
But what if we don't want to look to the world, we want to think about God in God's self? For that, we can look to St. Anselm's ontological argument.
What if we want to think about non-existo in non-existo's self? I mean, you can do that, but it sounds to me like it's just another presupposition.
For Anselm, it is a logical fact that if there is a God, he must be greater than anything else that can be conceived. If we could conceive of something greater, then that would be God's, not the first thing. Since we're able to state this, we know that God exists, at the very least, in our minds.
Oh, you weren't lying when you definitely said about this going downhill from here. I mean, even if we stick to mind existence, I can think of way better things than pretty much any god that theists have come up with. Even if you want to argue that your god am the best boy, I could just say, mine is exactly all that. Also, he gives out soapy handjobs. See, already better. The problem with this argument is there's no such thing as the best version of anything, really, but especially God, because there's always more that they can be and do, especially when you throw in subjective opinions about what they might want. Well, you know, what you want them to want, because that's always the case for some reason.
But if God only exists in our minds, then the idea existing in reality would be greater than our conception of God, but there can be nothing greater than God. Therefore, God must exist in reality.
This is the stupidest shit ever. Like, seriously, does anyone actually buy this one? And if you do, can I ask, how hard did you hit your head when your parents dropped you out of that airplane? If it isn't obvious why this is so flawed in so many ways, then just consider this. Who the fuck said that any greatest thing has to exist? As in, just because its existence would make that the greater version of the thing, that doesn't mean that it must exist. Only that version would be greater if existence even is a better state of being, which is also subjective. I mean, hangovers would be way better if it was just an imagined state instead of the hell on earth after a Tuesday celebrating Tuesday Day. Goddamn.
In other words, the very idea of God necessitates God's existence.
Circular as fuck. God exists because I want him to is a shit argument for wankers. Please don't do it again.
For some, this might sound like a mind trick or some wishful thinking. Surely thinking about unicorns doesn't make them exist.
It's like he's trying to debunk himself.
But that's not what Anselm is getting at. What this argument does is less convert atheists into theists, and more ground our understanding of God logically, helping us to understand the nature of God.
And fails to do either, because all you have done is said God is real because I think he is. That doesn't do shit other than have you confirm your beliefs as lazily as humanly possible. And I would be impressed if I wasn't so jealous. I actually have to confirm the things I think are facts about the universe.
If God is that than which nothing greater can be thought, then God must be omnipotent, omnipresent, all-loving, and completely sufficient in himself.
Fun fact, all of those things are presuppositions from some form of subjective greatness, especially all-loving. Who says the greatest thing needs to love anything? And what makes that better in the greatness scale than all-hating or all-indifferent? Because you prefer it? Who died and made you the arbiter of greatness? No one, because I'm not fucking dead, and it's whiskey, obviously.
God is not just some powerful wizard in the sky or some Santa Claus-like figure. For these things have limitations and potentialities.
You think Santa has limitations? Let's see. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. So he is clearly omnipresent, which is double good because, presence. He knows if you've been bad or good. So his judgment system is grounded in morality. And he can see into your mind, seeing as arguably certain bad actions happen in the mind, dictating how you treat people. He can travel the earth in a single night to hand out the presents, and seemingly does so instantly, since no one has ever seen him do it. I mean, if Santa doesn't meet most of your criteria for maximal being, I don't know who does. And you've got to assume he's only giving out gifts because he loves us. So yeah, an existent Santa Claus is better than a non-existent one. Therefore, Santa Claus exists. Now, where's my fucking bike, Santa Claus, you cunt?
The point he is trying to make is that God is not like other creatures, finite, weak, filled with potential. God is by his very nature perfect. And so rather than prove God outright, this proof helps to guide Christian theology away from illogical conceptions of God.
To entirely different illogical conceptions of God. Cool.
To believe in, say, a God that didn't care about the world would be a self-defeating conception of God, and so cannot exist.
Based on your biased, self-affirming belief that you matter and thus God must give a shit about you, and thus must care about the world. It's a very egocentric philosophy.
Of course, there are other logical ways of conceiving of God beyond deduction and abstract concepts. We can also look to human nature and propose what are called moral arguments.
Fuck me, I'm skipping this one because it's been coming up endlessly recently. Although, here's his conclusion for content. Humans invented morals. There is no agreement on basically any morals. Yes, even the big ones have people who don't agree they are good, bad, or whatever. So there cannot be a universal morality giver, otherwise we would know all the correct moral choices. The reason morality is hard is because it's a human construct, evolved to help keep the species alive. Moving on.
And for what purpose? Why do we exist?
To annoy me?
To answer that question, we must conclude with our fourth and final proof, teleological arguments.
Okay, cool. I mean, so far, all your proofs have proven bupkiss, but I'm sure the worst of the bunch by your own explicitly stated metric that you definitely said is going to be way fucking better.
When you think about the complexity of our world, the nature of subatomic particles, the depth of the human brain, how delicate life is in this universe and yet it thrives.
I think, damn it, how am I supposed to kill all the humans when they refuse to do the right thing and blow themselves the fuck up? I know, right?
And then consider the astronomical number of factors that had to be in place for each to develop over a course of 14 billion years, it seems improbable, to say the least, that they happened by accident.
But they didn't happen by accident. Not really, not in the way that you're framing it. They happened by systems. Systems that balanced out into the state it's currently in. That's not accidental, that's more like inevitable.
You're telling me that we exist simply by chance? Those are some long odds. The universe is more than a random collection of atoms. It has order, intelligibility, beauty, and even purpose.
Those last two, that's you doing the thing again. Beauty doesn't mean anything beyond a single person's sense of aesthetics. And purpose? What purpose? You want to tell me that you know the purpose of people based on the universe alone? Are you fucking joking? Without some God though argument, purpose is entirely absent from the universe. And if you mean things fill niches, well, yeah, obviously, evolution did that. No God required.
There is no way that all of this is the result of mere randomness.
You are literally showing things that are not the result of randomness, but also were absolutely not made on purpose. It's like you are trying to irritate me.
Christians conclude that there must be a source of the intelligence, a being that is all-knowing and all-powerful. God.
A conclusion that is, again, based on basically nothing. I mean, all-knowing and all-powerful. Okay, let's probe that. What do we know that makes things? Humans. Are they all-knowing or all-powerful? Obviously not. So why assume that things need those attributes in order to create things? It's specious reasoning at its worst, and not that I'm surprised that's been the theme of this whole video, and frankly, I think I've had enough of it for one day. This is 0 out of 4. All dumb all the time. Perhaps next time, the habit you should be breaking is, I don't know, not reading a fucking book? No, not that one.
Wait, before you go, I have something super important to tell you. It's life or death. It will change everything forever. Nope, wait, it's gone. Oh well, probably wasn't important. But while I have you, don't forget to comment, subscribe and notify. And if you want more of my smexy voice, check out Mrs. Six's channel, Spoonstaff Stories, where I narrate and voice all the videos, and she does the work. And if you want to support the channel, check out the merch store for cool t-shirts, or check out Patreon, memberships and PayPal to support directly. Finally, follow me on the medias of social to get completely pointless guff and to keep up on the latest releases. Oh, I just remembered what I was going to tell you. Whatever you do, don't touch the